Okay, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Great. So welcome to IDinsight session on using data in decision-making and social protection programs. I am Natasha Siyumbwa from Lusaka, Zambia. I am the Chief of Staff at IDinsight, and I will be moderating the session. I would first like to thank the Ministry of Community Development and Social Services in Zambia for inviting IDinsight to participate in the 2021 Virtual Zambia Social Protection Week. The theme this year is responsive social protection in a changing world. Our session today focuses on data use in decision-making and social protection. Data systems are increasingly playing a central role in national social protection strategy formulation throughout the world. The use of data and evidence in decision-making processes offers policymakers and implementers the opportunity to simultaneously assess program effectiveness and provide continuous guidance for improvements. This session will facilitate discussions on how policymakers are using data in social protection programs. It will allow policymakers to share their approach on data usage and their strategies to improve the data use culture within their ministries. During this session, IDinsight will also share lessons on how to leverage data for decision-making and social protection programs. So before I introduce the panel, I will go over some housekeeping. So we will begin with a panel discussion for about 40 minutes and then end with a Q&A session that will last for about 30 minutes. We're aiming for the session to last for about an hour and a half overall. Please keep your microphone muted at all times, but you can use the chat feature if you have any questions or comments at any point. Note that this session is being recorded, and that includes any message sent using the chat. Okay, now to our amazing panel. Could you please turn on your video? We have 4 panelists today. We have Mr. Andrew Kashoka, Mr. Laurent Kansinjiro, Ms. Bessie Msusa, and Mr. T. Arthur Chibwana. So, I'll start with Mr. Andrew Kashoka. Andrew is the Assistant Director of Information Technology at the Ministry of Community Development and Social Services in Zambia. He has worked in the public sector for over 10 years. He began his journey at the Ministry of Health, working as a principal ICT officer, eventually working his way up to Assistant Director of Information Technology, where he managed the coordination of the development, installation, and review of information systems in the ministry to ensure e-health service delivery to citizens, which is in line with e-governance policies. He joined the Ministry of Community Development and Social Services in May 2021, and now works with leadership and stakeholders to establish the high-level strategic direction for the National Community Development, NGO and Social Welfare Information Systems, which serves 18 million citizens and communities. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you.
Great. Next, we have Mr. Laurent Kansinjiro. Laurent is the Deputy Director of the Social Welfare at the Ministry of Gender, Community Development, and Social Welfare in Malawi. As of this year, he has worked in the public sector for 20 years. He began his journey with the Ministry of Education as a teacher in 2001, eventually transitioned into the Ministry of Gender in 2004. At the Ministry of Gender, he initially worked in the Child Affairs Department before transitioning to the Social Cash Transfer Program, also known as the SCTP, in 2011. He was instrumental in institutionalizing the SCTP over the last 10 years, and today it is the largest social protection program in Malawi, providing support to almost 300,000 rural households. Welcome, Laurent.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, next we have Ms. Bessie Msusa. Bessie is a Chief Economist in the Poverty Reduction and Social Protection Division, also known as PRSP. She has over 9 years of experience working on social protection programs in Malawi. Specifically, she is a desk officer responsible for the smooth implementation and monitoring of social protection interventions, with a particular focus on the Social Cash Transfer Program. She has been instrumental in the development of the Malawi National Social Support Program and its implementation strategy. She's leading PRSP's work in strengthening policy and programmatic linkages between social protection, productive inclusion, humanitarian assistance, and resilience. Welcome, Bessie.
Thank you, Natasha.
Lastly, we have Mr. T. Arthur Chibwana. Arthur is a manager at IDinsight based in Malawi. He has worked in social protection for 5 years, focusing on evidence generation and use in areas such as graduation and resilience. Prior to IDinsight, Arthur led the development and delivery of high-impact initiatives to root out poverty and inequality in Southern Africa, and provided oversight for social and economic justice at Christian Aid covering Malawi, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. He previously led monitoring, evaluation, and learning at Christian Aid in Malawi, focusing on research, learning, and program reflections. Arthur has held different M&E research and modeling roles in CGIAR centers, including International Potato Center and International Food Policy Research Institute. Arthur currently leads the Malawi Learning Partnership and helps the government of Malawi to use data-driven approaches to make decisions in social protection, to outsize social impact and end outer poverty. He also manages evaluations for projects that prevent violence against children in Uganda. Okay, so that is the whole panel. So I'm just going to start with some housekeeping. So we really want to make sure that you guys just feel free to send any questions that you may have at any point, and we will save those questions for the panel discussion. So I'll begin the panel discussion now, and it's take about 40 minutes. So the first thing that I'd like to ask is just about the nature of the panelists' work, and I'd want each one of them to tell us briefly about what they do and the programs that they are implementing in their ministries, just a little overview of their role. So I'll start with Bessie. Could you please just give us a quick overview of what you're working on?
Thank you, Natasha. I work for the Ministry of Economic Planning and Development and Public Sector Reforms, specifically in the Poverty Reduction and Social Protection Division. So we are coordinators of all social protection programs in Malawi. We don't implement any program, but we just produce, develop programs, and then we give to the line ministries to implement. We are the holders of the social protection policy in Malawi and also the Malawi National Social Support Program. So in the Malawi National Social Support Program, the first one was focusing more on the individual programs like the Social Cash Transfer Program, Public Works, School Meals, Village Savings and Loans, and then the microfinance. But the second Malawi National Social Support Program changed focus because we wanted to implement the programs in a holistic and coordinated manner. So the Malawi National Social Support Program 2 mainly focuses on the 3 main pillars and 2 supporting pillars. So the 3 main pillars are the consumption support, where now we have the social cash transfer program, the school meals, and the public works, because they give cash transfers, and also the other programs giving in-kind support, they're under the consumption support. And then the pillar number 2, under resilience building, because we realized that these cash transfers alone cannot show impact. So we have to link these beneficiaries into other resilient building programs. So we look at the other interventions from our colleagues from the village savings and loans and others who now implement the resilience building interventions. And then the pillar number 3 is about shock sensitive. How do we prepare our beneficiaries? How do we respond? And how do we implement the shock sensitive social protection? So the other 2 pillars are just not technical, but just supporting pillars, because so we have the system strengthening. We realize that even if we work hard, if the systems are not in place, then we cannot manage to implement these programs in a coordinated manner. So this pillar looks at strengthening all the systems, the payment systems, the grievance redress systems, and even the targeting, retargeting, looking at the UBR and the like. And the other pillar is about linkages, linking the participants of social protection programs to other interventions outside the social protection programs, so that they also graduate into sustainable livelihoods. Thank you, and over.
Great, thank you, Bessie. And could you also tell us briefly about what you do and the programs you're implementing at your ministry?
Great, thank you. So within the Ministry of Community Development, basically we support service delivery in terms of technology, its deployment in the country. And above that, the intention is to ensure that we transition data into actionable information for data-driven decision-making. So we look at improving strategies across various programs within the ministry departments. And this is through utilization of our various levels of experience within the team. We also have critical stakeholder engagement for streamlined support for various functionalities within the ministry, from our NGO, community development, social welfare, your departments of human resource, planning and information, monitoring and evaluation. So we are a cost center as well to ensure that government resources utilized for the right purpose by ensuring that data is made available for decision support. Some of the other issues that we focus on is digital strategy development and implementation, stakeholder coordination and engagement, business process reviews, software design, client capacity servicing, support for business intelligence and analytics with the use of technology. And this helps with coordination towards policy planning, budgeting, and information systems management. We also ensure that we identify critical resources and expertise for various development of management information systems, M&D, and any other electronic systems to improve quality of community and social service data. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We have a comment on the chat just asking if possible for our panelists to turn on their videos so that we can, so that the audience can see them as they speak. Thank you. Okay, next, Laurent, could you please tell us about your role and what program you're implementing at the ministry?
Natasha, I am the Deputy Director of Social Affairs responsible for the Social Support Division, which is basically the division under Department of Social Affairs that manages, coordinates the social cash transfer program. We call ourselves as an implementing arm of the social cash transfer program because we are the main link in terms of implementation with the district councils in as far as social cash transfer program is concerned. Ours is the social cash transfer program, which started way back in 2006 with one district, and within one district, one group village headman. And now we are in all the 28 districts, reaching out to 293,000 households. The program that I coordinate has three main objectives. One, to address extreme poverty and hunger. Two, to promote school enrollment. And three, to improve the nutritional well-being and general well-being of beneficiary households that we target. we are into a program that targets at least 10% of the ultra poor and labor constrained households. And when you unpack that, usually we are a program that is reaching out to elderly-headed households, people with disabilities, people with chronic illnesses, child-headed households, and many other households that are keeping people with different vulnerabilities and challenges. As a social cash transfer program, our main roles entail one, building the capacity of the district councils to be able to implement the program, designing systems and reviewing systems for the implementation of the social cash transfer program within the councils. But we also do overall supervision of the implementation of the activities under the social cash transfer program. We are also the bridge between the district councils and the policy holder on one hand, in which case the policy holder, I'm looking at the Economic Planning and the Development Ministry, as well as also a bridge between the district councils and the Ministry of Finance, Treasury, in terms of mobilization of funding from government itself, as well as from different partners. I am into a program which, as it stands now, I can proudly say that it has stood the test of scalability, and it has proved to be an impactful program, especially to the most vulnerable and poor household on the ground. At least I can attest that through the program, at least we have seen at least increases in school enrollment, improvements in food security of the beneficiary households, multiplier effect in the local economy, as well as improve the health-seeking behaviors, for example, amongst our beneficiary household. Just to mention few of the impacts that the program has had on our beneficiaries. It is the most popular program as I talk now in Malawi. On the ground, it's blended into Glapa, and everyone, if you go down in the ground, we'll be telling you about how Best into Glapa has achieved the kind of impacts that I've just talked about. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurent. And yes, finally, we have Mr. Arthur Chibwana. Could you please tell us a bit about IDinsight and your role there?
Thank you very much, Natasha. Indeed, as IDinsight, we exist to support government and foundations and other organizations to use data and evidence in their decision making. With the governments that we're working with, we have focused on
sorry, we can hear you, Arthur. Arthur, are you still there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thanks, Natasha. My apologies. Yes, so as I was saying, we are very obsessed with impact. So our focus, we're laser focused on helping improve decisions, not just publishing papers. As such, we want to provide value more value as we measure value by the lives that we've improved. But also we tailor engagements. Basically, we match the right tools to the needs and constraints of decision makers. As you know, governments don't have all the money in the world, but they have other people to serve. So we help them, we provide the tools and instruments that help them make the right decisions that optimize the limited resources that they have. With the government of Malawi, we are working on different projects. The first one is the project that Laurent has been described, focusing on improving monitoring systems, capacity building, but also working on data systems that the teams need. And then we are also working with Bessie, in this case, the Ministry of Economic Planning and Development, which is the policyholder, and it's responsible for all social protection program. Our work intends to support the unit to use some of the administrative data for making better decisions that are going to impact all the people that we have and on the social protection programs. In Zambia, we have worked with the ministry as well. We have quite a footprint in Zambia. We have worked with the Ministry of Community Development and Social Services, working on data system strengthening. And we have also worked on data system designs on global innovation funds. With global innovation funds, the Ministry of Health as well did some impact evaluations and several others. So this is basically what we focus on as IDinsight to help our government leaders make the right decisions based on data and evidence. As you all know, they say in God we trust, but everybody else must bring data. No data, we can't trust. Thank you.
Exactly, Arthur. Thank you so much. Okay, so now we're going to go into some questions. I'll be asking individual panelists different questions that are applicable to their roles, but other panelists must feel free to comment or add on to whatever the leading panelist says. So right now I'm going to talk to Bessie. So Bessie, you talked about how EPND, where you work, is the policy holder for social protection in Malawi. So we just want to understand, what do you think the role of data and evidence is in your work, or what should it be?
Thank you, moderator. In social protection, data is very important because first, it informs policy decision making. Without data, you cannot progress in any policy decision making. My colleague Laurent talked about how the social cash transfer started in one district in Nchinji, and then it has scaled up to all the 28 districts. The decision to scale up was based upon the data available. After a year of implementation, it was evaluated, and they saw that it's really a program which can be implemented across the country in terms of reducing the vulnerability of those of the poor. So that's why it was scaled up. That's the role of data. And again, in terms of monitoring progress, you really need data so that you know where you're going, where you've come from. That's why we do the baseline, we do the midline, we do the impact evaluations, so that we really need the progress of the programs which we are implementing. Again, we also want to increase responsiveness and the inclusiveness of the interventions which we are doing. Without data, you cannot know how many you are reaching, and also, is it inclusive? Is it adequate? So in all these implementation avenue, you really need a data to implement the programs very well. It also increases transparency and also accountability, as the progress of information can be shared among its different stakeholders. So Laurent has already said it's reaching to 10% of the population, but we know that at the moment, ultra poverty is about around 21%, 21.1%. So data really will inform the policy decision making in terms of, do we increase the numbers so that we reach all the poor, or do we increase the transfer levels? So data is very, very important to assess performance. Thank you.
Thanks, Bessie. And related to that, do you think the data use culture has changed in Malawi over time? Has data become more and more important or less important over time in social protection?
Yeah, data has become more important in social protection. You know, even if you want to lobby the Minister of Finance to increase funding, we really have to have data at hand, so that we provide information to the minister, so that he knows whatever we are lobbying for, it has a backing in terms of data. You cannot go to the minister and lobby for more resources if you don't have data. So over the years, data has become more important in social protection programs in Malawi. Thank you.
Thank you, Bessie. That's great to hear. I guess I'd want to hear from the Zambian side. Andrew, how would you describe the data use culture in social protection as a sector in Zambia, having worked across 2 different ministries?
Thank you. Firstly, in relation to the data use culture, data and data use, in my perspective, firstly is the ability for us to consume, secondly, understand, and thirdly, utilize information at an expert level to increase business acumen, which in turn would result in improved decision support, and obviously provides a benchmark for referencing new ideas for future business decisions. So now, looking at it from the government perspective, information coming to a central level, in this case, the hierarchy of data in the ministries from district, your province to the national level, is firstly the issue of consistency. You need to consistently collect certain parameters of data that need to come up to the national level for decision support. And in turn, the ministry reports into central government for information to be disseminated at the presidential level. So data is very critical, because when funding comes into the ministry, there has to be accountability, there has to be transparency, consistency with this information that is coming through. So the data use culture, the current data use culture, of course, has 2 sides to it. One is it's need dependent. By this, I mean, sometimes little data is structured into a standard template of information in terms of a start point to review decisions made by business owners. The business owners are the various departments in the ministry, also pointing to the PS's office and the minister. So those are various business owners. They want to see different aspects of that data. So when I say it's need dependent, sometimes you have interest from implementers who only want a particular stream of data, but it borders across multiple departments. So how you make these synergize and collaborate to give you the relevant data, sometimes you may find disjoint information, because the hierarchy of decision is very cardinal in this data transmission. And then who utilizes this data? Is it of relevance to the government, or is it relevant to the program? So the government perspective and sometimes project implementation may vary to some extent. And therefore, when we look at data in terms of our culture, is how sustainable is this data that we're looking at, and is it of value? So the value driver becomes very critical in this aspect. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I guess related to that, Laurent, you work more at the implementation level than Bessie and Andrew. So how has the data use culture changed within the social cash transfer program, let's say over the last 5 years, and what has influenced that?
Thank you, Natasha. Over the past 5 years, we have really seen an increased desire to use data and evidence in order to inform our decision-making processes. You will note that from our history that I think we had the first phase of piloting the program of social cash transfer program. We piloted it in 6 districts. Even at that time, when we had presented the case to cabinet, they requested to say we wanted to scale up this. They said, no, you cannot just scale up. Please pilot it in some more districts so that we have got enough data and evidence to help us make an informed decision in terms of viability as well as efficacy of implementing such a huge program. So even right from the start, where we were back around 2007, 2008, cabinet had to say, no, give us more data. And it simply underscores I think the culture, even at the highest level of political will, that's there about the need to have data and evidence in order to make a decision. After we had done the piloting, of course, and expanded the pilot to 6 districts, that eventually informed some of the processes that came later. For example, in terms of informing the social protection policy that has been in use until to date, informing also it shaped in terms of informing the National Social Support Program 1 as well as National Social Support Program 2 because of the evidence that we generated at that time. Over the past 5 years, because after it had been proved that this works, now there was a great desire for everybody to see the program scaled up to the rest of Malawi, and that scale up again needed evidence of whether our operational processes would really withstand the test of scalability. And to do that, we again really needed to look at the data and the evidence that we had generated during the piloting phase. For example, I would say the decision, for example, to change some of the design processes in terms of targeting, introduction of the MIS, they were all based, I think, on the evidence that we initially got that during the piloting phase, our processes were basically more manual and a bit more inefficient than would be the case now. So these are some of the processes that we went through, and they have been largely influenced by the desire to have evidence, to have data before you move on. Even in terms of, I think it is the very same evidence that we have generated over the period that has also helped mobilize financial resources, even from government itself. I remember from 2010, government was only contributing from about 1% to now at least 10%, but in absolute terms, it's contributing a lot. 3 billion Malawi kwacha. That's being contributed by the government. It's all because of, I think, the data that we have, that we are able to generate from our MIS and our own systems, and be able to present that at all levels, to parliamentarians, to the head of state himself, to the Minister of Finance, and to EV&D, that is our policy hold for them to make decisions that favor us as a program, as in Tukulapa.com. Yeah, I think for now.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, actually jumping off of that on how maybe programs such as like the social cash transfer program collects a lot of data, and we want to make sure that data is used also by the policy holder, to make national policy. So I want to ask Bessie, has any data collected by either your ministry or other programs resulted in a change in program implementation or in social protection policy? I know with COVID, there might have been some new decisions that were informed by data. So could you just give us an example of any programs or changes in implementation strategy due to data and evidence?
Yeah, so in Malawi, we have the Unified Beneficiary Registry. So this is just a repository of all households, social characteristics of all households, which is being used by so many programs in terms of targeting and reaching out to the beneficiaries. So for example, the social cash transfer program is using the UBR to target its beneficiaries, and also Public Works using the same Unified Beneficiary Registry to target beneficiaries. And also recently we have seen the rain season response using the data from the UBR, where UBR is available. So the use of data is there in Malawi. Recently, under the Kuchi, we also extended to the district centers around the bombers, so we called it a bomber response. That one also used data from the UBR where it was available. Where it was not available, we used the other types of targeting the beneficiaries. So real data collected by our ministry is being used in implementation of social protection programs and informing decision policies. Thank you.
Thanks, Bessie. Yeah, that's great to hear that there's this United Beneficiary Registry that registers all households in Malawi, so that social protection programs and other ministries can use that database to target vulnerable households or households that fit the program. Andrew, I'm wondering, do you think such a system would be beneficial in Zambia, or does such a database exist where vulnerable households are registered and different ministries and programs can use that database or registry for targeting?
Yes, so we do have quite a number of registers that we use in Zambia as well. And yes, it would benefit, but one of the critical aspects, even before we talk in detail about technology, is what type of data is being collected. And that's what really determines the value of what we will get out of the actual data system. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's great. And I think Bessie had also mentioned that it was that data and evidence was used to inform Kuchi. So Kuchi is actually the COVID urban cash transfer initiative that was launched in Malawi to help urban households that might have been affected by COVID. And IDinsight had done some of that work to do quick data analysis to figure out that basically the targeting and enrollment, who should be enrolled in that program, who was vulnerable, and so on. So I think it was actually the social cash transfer that was also implementing that. So I guess actually maybe I can ask Arthur a little bit of like how IDinsight tries to support different governments or bodies, but just by using that evidence for decision making, and how maybe we've helped the SCTP in the past.
Yeah, thank you very much, Natasha. Maybe before I go there, I wanted to just comment on the change in terms of data use. Basically, having worked in the sector for some time, I have observed a lot of improvements in the way government is using data. So you can see the way SCTP has been operating. It is extremely data intensive. They're collecting a lot of data on a daily basis. both for accountability, but also intervention proofing. So even on a small project implementation, you will see government requesting for evidence over and over. And that's the space that IDinsight has been filling with the social cash transfer program. I'll give an example of the Kuchi program that the urban cash transfer initiative that Bessie just mentioned. So it is a program that is also data intensive, but also that requires a lot of speed because it was an emergency program. There wasn't time on the clock, but still government would say, we need the right data for this. So starting from the registration process, doing data monitoring services, making sure that the right people are targeted. So all these have required a lot of coordination across government ministries, but also IDinsight to make sure that we are providing the best quality of data that can make that can inform decisions. And immediately after implementation, we've seen government advising us to collect more data to assess how the program went, basically looking at the process as well as the feedback from beneficiaries of the program in order to inform the next phase, which means that the need for culture, the need for data and evidence has actually grown, and it is now a very important element for government to make decisions, both in targeting program implementation as well as developing and designing new programs.
Yes, thank you, Arthur. I guess connected to that in a way, I also want to ask Laurent, how do you ensure that policymakers like Bessie, who's the policy holder, how do you make sure that they use that SCTP data for decision making within your ministry or within the country? The data that's collected by the SCTP, for example.
Okay, thank you, Natasha. I thought, yeah, Bessie will complement, I think, at a later stage, how we assist them in terms of providing the necessary data so that they can make the decision. But number one, I think because we out of data, what we have done is for our key partners, at least they have got some lights, of course, with limitations into our system, so that for some of the things that for which they need quickly to check and use data and make decisions, they can just quickly have access to. So as I am talking now, Bessie as a policy holder has access to some of our system data, of course, with limitations in terms of to what extent he can go. But at least for data, that as a Minister of Economic Planning and Development, they can quickly just log in, get the data, and use it to quickly make some of the decisions that they make for the benefit of all of us. That's number one. But also, number two, we usually have coordination meetings where you share, I think, some of the analysis of the trends, patterns that the data that we have is producing. For example, at operational level, for example, on a daily basis, maybe our system generates data in terms of cases, complaints that we get from beneficiaries, data around who has not received money this month or who has received money that month, and immediately all that data is analyzed, and in some cases where we see red flags or where we see elsewhere to intervene and make decisions, we quickly come in, share with our partners, analyze it, look at it, and come up with the quick decision. So we have, I think, platforms for sharing, discussing technical issues on the basis of data that we generate from our system. We, at a political level of things, Usually we routinely send briefs, we send memos to our head of state, to our minister, and our government we just changed the government last year, and with the change of government, usually myself, Bessie, and also other, I think, sectors, we usually have to write briefs and just to inform and present the situation on the ground in terms of cash transfer programs, in terms of, I mean, where we are coming from, and where we want to go, so that at that level they can also match, I think, what technically we have on the basis of the data that we have, vis-a-vis their manifestos, vis-a-vis their visions at that political level. The same goes for our parliamentarians. Almost every sitting of parliament, we engage them just to present them the picture on the ground, the situation on the ground, in terms of implementation progress, implementation challenges, and of course to use the same to lobby for more financing, more support, and everything. So that's how, those are some of the key avenues that we use data for decision making at the level. I can testify here that because of that, even in some cases, if not most cases, even our members of parliament bombard us with sometimes specific data in terms of their areas of constituencies where they are serving. How many are my beneficiaries? How many, for example, are in my constituency? Yeah, we are able to fish out that data, analyze them for them, and give out to them. With IDinsight support, we have been taught, I think, another new way. Sometimes we have always tended to rely on, say, maybe impact evaluations and some such other studies to quickly make decisions. Yeah, so with IDinsight, for example, there's been a new, I think, another approach that came in terms of quickly generating data, I mean, analyzing the data that we have and quickly pushing it to make decisions for the cash transfer program. We, for example, have been able to, all the data that is in the targeting module, with the IDinsight support, we're able to get it analyzed and, for example, check how far we are able to reach our beneficiaries below or above the 10% threshold that as a matter of policy we are reaching out to beneficiaries. And we were able to see that for some districts, for example, they had the coverage was way below the 10% that we envisages, while in other districts the coverage was way above the threshold, the ultra poverty threshold. And this is something that eventually I think is feeding into the debate, for example, to move from the current, I think, design parameters to something that might be more categorical, direct categorical, and easier to understand for our communities out there and for our beneficiaries.
Yes.
Of course, also not to mention during the immediacy, I think when we were implementing the Kuchi, I think Bessie will agree and compliment on this one, that there was a need, an immediate need to continuously and at a fast pace to quickly be analyzing the data that is coming out from the field and making decisions in terms of how fast we can go in order to meet the targets in terms of completion dates, but also in terms of whether we are targeting the right geographical areas in terms of poverty, in terms of vulnerability. And this is an area that I think IDinsight, with the support again from other partners, were able to quickly analyze such such kind of data as it comes from the field and provide on spot advice to say, okay, maybe for example, enumerator XYZ, can you pull up your socks? You are not, I think this is not, you are slow, or you are too fast, what is happening? Or maybe you seem to be just moving around the very same household.
Yes. Actually, Laurent, I think you picked up on something interesting. Yes, in terms of rapid data analysis. So I think government is often under pressure to make very quick decisions, and with the importance of using data and evidence to make sure that you're making the right decisions. Sometimes that can be a conflict. I think in the past people have used, yes, impact evaluations, which take very long process evaluations. But yeah, what you mentioned is that IDinsight offers sometimes something that's faster. Sometimes it could be monitoring dashboards. Sometimes it could just be like rapid assessment of live data. So I guess moving from Malawi to Zambia, I wanted to ask Andrew, just from your experience working across ministries and data, what best practices would you share on how to turn data into policy decisions and quickly?
Great, thank you. So one of the critical factors is collaboration. So with close collaboration between your various policymakers, your data scientists, defined in a framework of iterative approaches, we then allowed to permit ourselves to transform our policy questions into a suited data analysis question. And therefore, it's easy to deliver relevant insights with flexibility, and the desired decision makers would then review what has been shared, just touching on to what Parliament would require, what presidential levels would require, your minister and permanent secretaries, and various directors who have performance contracts in the case of Zambia to deliver on critical aspects based on the funding that is given. So some of the other best practices is to understand what this smarter policymaker would basically want to look into, and how or when the contributing role of each department would come in by breaking the yoke of silos, because a lot of departments are very specialized, but exist as silos, holding a lot of data. And this data sometimes, as data custodians, if you look at it from the M&E perspective, needs to be shared across various departments. So one of the approaches that we had in the past when I was with Ministry of Health is to look at the business processes and analyze at which point the various departments would then synergize so that we have one clear business engine. And this business engine would then pull in your various standard operating procedures, various guidelines and policies to see which ones would fit in for decision support. And we had developed through partnerships a data warehouse, which put data across from multiple transactional systems in which we applied standards to ensure that we had business intelligence and data interoperability. So we started then to change the culture from just having a report that's generated on an annual basis or a quarterly basis to something that brought value. Why is it generated? What is it bringing in terms of an impact? And what would then it influence? Can we review it historically, the last 2 to 3 years? And if in the last 2 to 3 years, we seem to have a similar trend, what can we do with that data? And that's when the research questions would then come about. Thanks.
Yeah, Natasha, there's something I like about Andrew's sentiments on interoperability, which reminds me of how the landscape is in social protection. Taking an example of Malawi, there are a lot of social protection programs that Bessie and team are leading, besides the social cash transfer program. And all these are intended towards ultra poor and poor people within their communities, which in this case, with having multiple programs targeting these people, having separate management information systems specific to the different projects, makes it an even interesting case. So we are exploring with EP&D ways to integrate various systems, MISs, so that decision makers like Bessie, Laurent, Andrew can just click and monitor the entire sector at once. So this means that linking the different MISs and coming up with dashboards that can help decision makers make very quick decisions. So I just like the interoperability issue that Andrew has brought in. So another important thing that I wanted to also mention is on the on targeting of programs. Normally, the social protection programs take long for them to revise the targeting process or to revise beneficiaries. Generally, it takes 4 to 5 years. And as Bessie mentioned, they're looking at collecting this data on a regular basis, but also being able to have data that can be updated on a regular basis. So we're working with Bessie and team in the EP&D to look at how we can help with setting up systems that can collect basic beneficiary data on a regular basis, and have at least up-to-date data when they need to develop programs. So we'll be introducing data on demand to the whole process to make sure that we can be able to contribute and help them make decisions with data recency.
Yes, thank you, Arthur. I think you also mentioned on there are basically some challenges that social protection as a whole face, and that can be targeting, and that can be, trying to make sure that every vulnerable person is reached coverage. So I just want to ask, I guess I'll start with Bessie, but it's open to everyone. What are some challenges that social protection as a sector needs to overcome to achieve social impact? And how can organizations like IDinsight support such efforts?
Yeah, I think I'll start. I think in terms of the challenges, as for Malawi, I'll talk specifically for Malawi, adequacy is a challenge in terms of the transfer amounts. So at the moment, I think the average transfer amount is around $12 per month. If you look at the food basket, it's far below the food basket. So that's a big challenge to us, but we are looking into that one as government to see how we can adjust the transfer level so that it meets the minimum amount of food basket. Again, the social protection programs are mostly donor funded, but at least we are trying. I'll just give you 2 examples. The school meals, it was completely donor funded 5 years ago, but at the moment, I think government has taken over the homegrown school meals from 0%. Now we're at 14% funding from government. For social cash transfer, yes, we are the amount supported by government has been increasing over the years from 2%. Now we're at 9%. So we can see that at least we are really moving, but it's still a challenge. In terms of coverage, we have already talked about it, that the zero coverage. Ultra poverty is at 21%, but the social cash only targets 10%. So this is really still a challenge, which we really need to look into it. In terms of the systems, We've just started looking at the systems. How can we strengthen the systems so that they support the implementation of the social protection programs in Malawi? So one example is the UBR, but we really need to strengthen it so that we really have real-time data. At the moment, the targeting is done after 4 years, but programs like humanitarian, they really need real-time data so that they can support the humanitarian caseloads which arise at that point in time, because then we're looking at the shock responsive social protection, because when a disaster comes, they really want data which is up to date, not 4 years data. So that's also what that's the challenge in terms of timeliness to reach our beneficiaries if a shock hits. Over to my colleagues.
For me, I think I will single out one challenge that is maybe more connected to the state of our technological advancement. We all understand that I think in order to achieve efficiencies in the implementation of cash transfers, for example, you need to employ a lot of technology. Yeah, but with sometimes the state of our technological development, especially in the rural areas, sometimes it becomes difficult to migrate to purely or a more sophisticated type of technologies in order to implement these programs effectively. I'll give one example of, I think, migration, for example, to e-payment. We still have pockets of areas that are very, very hard to reach, where you do not find maybe even a network, and even electricity is still a challenge. So again, the private sector, service providers, I mean, to just start investing in those areas simply for the sake of cash transfer, sometimes might not be a very, very viable option for them. So that's one of the, that's one of the challenges. And I think this challenge has, in our case, also hampered the quick migration to e-payment processes. And even in some cases, the payment system that we have employed, which is manual, cannot just be automated very, very easily to be in sync with modern financial management processes, simply because at some point still you have to carry on with manual processes on the ground, because the technology plus the ecosystem and the terrain are not yet permitting. We require a bit of time and investments, something that might be beyond the realm of the social protection and the cash transfers alone. Thank you. Over.
Thanks, Laurent. Yeah, so I think combined, you and Bessie have mentioned, there's inadequacy of transfer amounts, there's dependence on donor funds, and I guess that also leads to low coverage and sometimes slow shock responses. And Laurent, you've covered that, there's this new technology coming where we could use e-payments, but just even in some areas, there's no electricity or mobile phones or connectivity, and those are some challenges that just social protection as a sector is facing. Andrew, I know you only recently joined the Ministry of Community Development last month, but are there any challenges that you've already seen and that you think social protection as a sector needs to overcome?
So critically, I think you having mentioned the other challenges, one of the issues that may come up, especially when we look at donor support, is the issue of sustainability. We know that a lot of stakeholders are willing to support various programs, but how sustainable are they? If we give up social cash transfer, for example, to a particular household, we know that that is a requirement. We know that the amounts that we give out may not be adequate. We know that the need will not end. So this is a continuous provision. But when we start to talk of other sustainable approaches, we start to look at firstly evidence of the impact of this support. Are these households meeting their monthly quota in terms of food, electricity, water, and other variables? But then in terms of sustainability, how do we then bring the community into the whole picture around social protection from the perspective of an awakened community, if I may call it that, which would then support an Ubuntu approach towards the poor and vulnerable through a oneness, either around your various forms of agriculture or other potential investments that can pull up a community so that the vulnerable, the underprivileged, the poor can be supported in a particular manner. For example, if you have our farmer input support programs, if we had specific areas that we're investing in that would then benefit the vulnerable.
Oh, sorry. I think admin muted Mr. Kashoka.
Well, I don't know how
great.
much. Yeah, great.
Oh, just 10 seconds. Yeah.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Yeah, so I was saying, if we had a community that, let's say, decides to go into a venture of growing a particular food crop for the underprivileged specific, some of that can generate resources when you sell some of those commodity. You could also provide some form of meals to those vulnerable families. Over.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Kashoka. I think you bring up a great point about sustainability. And having Laurent here, I think that's interesting because there have been lots of arguments against the social cash transfer program and its sustainability. Like you said, that's a continuous program because there'll always be vulnerable people. And there's some people who will be on the social cash transfer program for a lifetime just because they may never graduate out of poverty, or they're just not in a position to. So Laurent, I guess this will be the last question before we move to Q&A. Laurent, do you think there's evidence that shows that social protection programs have a sustainable future? And for you, just in particular to social cash transfer programs, do you think they can be sustainable? I think you've also been muted.
Yeah, thank you, Natasha. Yes, there is evidence that our social cash transfer program can be sustained. I think the first number one, we are guaranteed of continuous political will. Irrespective of whether governments change or not. The part of the evidence, when you look at currently members of parliament are meeting, and we have been engaging them, and they have demonstrated usually their resolve to make sure that this is a program that they have to fight for in terms of resources, even in parliament. And since I joined the program, I've seen parliamentarians come and go, but the will and the resolve to support the program has been there. Likewise, even from the side of government, there have always been that particular will, which gives us that this is a program that even at that level, they are prepared to sustain it. But also, apart from that, the evidence that we have in terms of impact gives us the confidence that this is a program that everyone would want to keep, even at the grassroots level. I mean, the impacts that the case studies of households that. Okay, yeah. So what I was saying is that even when you look at the impacts that we have, they convince everybody that this is the program that we need to keep, and this social protection is something that we need to have in our midst in as far as addressing poverty and vulnerability is concerned. So that alone gives us the confidence that it's a program that has a good future and can be sustained. And it is because of that impact that Bessie stands or is in her office, always supporting us to say, no, this is something that we need to lobby for more resources, to lobby for more support from partners as well as the government, because as the economic planning and development, equally they are convinced from the impacts that the program has had on ourselves. With the coming of new innovations and everything, we are sure that some of the inefficiencies and challenges that would be there are likely to be ironed out with the innovations that are coming on board, the technologies that are coming on board, and that again gives us the confidence that if at all the decision makers were to be reluctant about proceeding with the program, but with the innovations that are coming in, likely they would think twice in terms of whether to proceed, not to proceed with the program. I think, yeah, that's what I can say for now.
Yeah. No, I think that's all great. And I think it's great to end the panel discussion on that optimistic note. And now we'll start taking some questions. I see some people already sent a couple questions to the chat, so I'll just read them out. But everyone, feel free to send any questions you may have to the chat. And
yes,
we'll
Natasha.
use that.
So,
oh, yes, Bessie.
Just to sum up.
Yes.
Do not leave anyone behind. That's why it's sustainable goal number 1, end poverty. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Bessie. Okay, actually, the first question I think was towards Bessie from Anna, which is, what is the most imperative data or statistic that should influence your decision once deciding the beneficiary for social protection? So I think it's what's the most imperative indicator maybe that influences how you target for social protection programs. I guess anyone can answer, but Bessie, I think this was asked during your session.
Thank you, Natasha. So different social protection programs have got different targeting criteria. For the first program, which the social cash transfer program, we target the ultra-poor with labor constraint, those households who have got no labor. Those are the first ones to be targeted for the social cash transfer program. So after that, we have the public works program. That one targets the ultra-poor, but they have got labor. So they have to do something, and then they get the transfers. So different types of programs use different types of targeting criteria. So it's upon the Unified Beneficiary Registry to rank those beneficiaries, those participants. They are not beneficiaries in the UBA, but they are just households. So to rank those households into their different categories, depending on the vulnerability, so that when programs come, they can just tap in, or they can just use their indicators which they are looking for. Are they looking for under 5s? They'll find them. Are they looking for the elderly? They'll find them in the Unified Beneficiary Registry, and then they target, and then they start implementing their programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Bessie. There's also this question to Arthur. Studies show that politicians do not like to hear of data and evidence. To what extent do you work independent of political influence on the data that you produce? Oh, Arthur, you're on mute.
Right, good question. Thank you for that question. Likely, we do not work directly with politicians. We leave Laurent and Bessie to fight on the front line. But there's only one thing that we can provide. So we ensure that we work alongside government to supply the evidence for or against a policy or an intervention, whether it works or it doesn't. So just by answering the right questions, such as, does this work? Is it implemented as intended? Does it affect the right people? Was targeting done right? Such questions form the right artillery that now the policymaker, the policy people that interface with politicians such as Bessie and Laurent can use to basically advocate for what is right. The observation is right. Politicians have different objectives altogether, but in a program like this one or in social protection, their lives at stake here. Any mistake that can be done will affect lives, real lives. As such, supplying the right data and evidence to help make the right decisions is the only service that we can do to help to make sure that we contribute, we improve as many lives as possible.
Thank you, Arthur. Yeah, so I'll just move to the next question so we can cover as many as possible. So this one is to the whole panel. Why is it, and this comes from, hold on, Muya. Why is it so difficult to have data disaggregated to include persons with disabilities beyond male and female, rural, urban? We are saying we must not leave anyone behind, yet data on disabilities is always seen or lumped into general categories, like where it's clustered as vulnerable groups. So I guess the question here is like, why isn't it disaggregated into type of disability and how different groups can be helped? So this is to the whole panel, if anyone has any response.
Yeah, so maybe I could start. Firstly, data in terms of its identifiable state is always available in a hierarchy starting at the district, province, and national. It gets disaggregated as it goes above district level. The reason is very simple: data security. We have to safeguard the identity of the individual at the point of entry, so that person is known in the community that they are with the first person they came into contact with. But if what we're asking is if we want to report these data elements, that is a different approach. And this is where we said, if we're trying to tell a story with data, there's a storyline that has to be told. There has to be someone demanding this particular data element, and there has to be an impact in terms of someone who's interested in that particular element to finance it or to strengthen that process. So if we had to pull this data, it is possible. But then once we pull it, are we trying to say in a particular community, there is this person who has the following disability to this extent. What then do we do with data when it but the support in terms of social this particular
So I'm not sure if it's my signal. Hello? Can other people hear Mr. Kashoka? I cannot tell if it's just my signal.
No.
Oh, okay. Okay, I see. Yeah, I think his signal is bad, so he's dropped out and will rejoin. Okay, I guess while waiting for him to rejoin, Laurent, did you also want to comment on how the data on disabilities is collected and what, in Malawi?
Yeah, well, at least from our experience, I think we have had two experiences. One on the main social cash transfer program. We have been collecting data on disability, and but in terms of how we present it is we don't go beyond I think presenting it in terms of specific disabilities that households or individuals have. Part of it has to do with data security because it's a more personal or personalized data. But we are able to report on that. In terms of when you look at our coverage indicators, we are able to report on households headed by somebody with disability or households individuals with disability. What we don't go but we don't go beyond just reporting that because of the personalized nature of the data and the sensitivity associated with it. The other, I think, experience that we have had recently, which I think in part I think we overlooked the best. We were queried by the Malawi Human Rights Commission under the COVID-19 urban cash transfers. So it was noted that when we were reporting the data under the urban cash transfers, we the desegregation by disability. We just reported maybe by gender and maybe by age. So we are queried, and the Malawi Human Rights Commission felt we had not covered people with disabilities. We had a tough time with the Bessie trying to say that no. I think looking at the nature of COVID-19 and how quick we wanted to have the process completed so that people can start benefiting, our approach was we are almost targeting everybody and people with vulnerability, all vulnerabilities. So it was not that we left them out, but I think it was just the reporting on the template that was missing. So in part to that question, yes, I would agree. Sometimes because of, I think when you are in emergencies plus other factors, sometimes you leave out a certain key indicators that you would otherwise have you would have included in your indicator framework. But also sometimes the reality part is that for us as a social welfare department, I mean, when you talk of cash transfer program, for example, or social welfare in general, I think our clients, people with disabilities, the elderly, those vulnerable already categories. So usually we work on the assumption technically that, I mean, whether you report on them as a distinct indicator or not, at the end of the day, we are within the constituency which we operate and target on. So yeah, so much so that I think we sometimes on that basis tend to leave out the element of conspicuously showing or presenting that particular indicator in our reports, and because we just assume that no, everybody knows we are a social welfare department, and that's the kind of clientele that we already reach out to. Yeah, thank you. Maybe Bessie can add. They are the ones that got the whip from the Malawi Human Rights Commission on excluding data on disability. I don't know how the experience might be as different from mine from a social care department.
Yeah, maybe just to add, I think maybe also one of the challenges as social protection in Malawi is the issue about poverty targeting, because over the years we've been using poverty as a targeting criteria. But as we are moving on, we are looking at a life cycle approach. So in that one, we're also thinking about categorical targeting. So that maybe these other types of vulnerability can be conspicuous as we are targeting individually, targeting categorically, rather than lumping them under poverty targeting. So moving forward, that's what is on the table. And just to also add that an old age pension bill is underway because of the issue of not maybe looking into these categories of vulnerability. So if that bill passes, and then we'll start targeting the old persons, they have their own social protection programs. We can also look at the other types of vulnerabilities in terms of having their own programs, so that maybe they also have visibility, because what we are talking here, it's about visibility. But otherwise, all these types of categories of vulnerability, they are already included in the social protection programs in Malawi, but only that they are not visible as this is a disabled person, this is an old person. So moving forward, we are looking at maybe moving away from poverty targeting into categorical targeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll just read the comments quickly, then I'll go to someone who's had their hand raised for a while. So from Muya responding to your responses, the concept of data security has made us leave out a critical sector of our target population in social protection. We need to generate evidence to ensure that we plan well, better, and aggressively to tackle and break the transfer of poverty from one generation to another. And I think that's been responded to through Bessie's overview of how, at least in Malawi, they're doing this categorical targeting now so that you can meet the specific needs of different types of vulnerable groups. So I think maybe in future, then maybe the data will be more disaggregated for disability to meet different groups within different disabled groups needs. Kelobang, I think you've had your hand up for a while. Do you have a question?
Well, I think more a comment, ma'am. I think for me, I've listened to the discussions, and you know, it's the question is always in my mind. Why, you know, we do generate data, but I think it's clear to all and sundry that we don't generate, you know, with the frequency, with the, you know, the sort of adequacy, as Muya had pointed out. There are some gaps on some of these indicators, especially with persons with disabilities. And I think for me, one aspect that's come into my mind is that, you know, I think we maybe don't celebrate data enough in terms of the relevance of it, and showcase it enough in our social protection space. And I just want to, you know, congratulations to IDinsight for having a session specific to data. I think it's for me a refresher. We talk about other issues, but data doesn't always feature as prominently as it has in this session. And I think for me, this is why it gets left out. I mean, we put out a lot of publications. In those, there'll be some aspects of data, but you know, we don't have, for example, a purely data publication in Zambia, in Malawi, speaking specifically to social insurance. And I think this is we have to start perhaps in that, with the little data we have, put out something maybe quarterly, where we are talking about coverage for the programs that we have. I think if we can have that culture, deepen that culture of celebrating, publicizing, putting in all of the faces of our stakeholders, the social protection data we have, I think it will come right. I think the ministries will begin to have an appetite and an interest to reference that data, share it with the public. And as colleagues have said, this becomes a tracker. And I think mine is just to say congratulations, IDinsight, on this start. And I think we would want to do this more, such that the systems become lubricated and the officers become cultured in collecting that data, because it's there, it exists. Some of it manual, some of it automated. But I think it's just that it's something we haven't, I think, celebrated enough. So congratulations, IDinsight's panelists for bringing, I think, a topic that's often ignored, and then at the end of the day is our primary indicator whether we're still moving in the right direction. So thank you much.
Thank you so much for that comment. We definitely appreciate it, and we are huge advocates of using data for decision making it, as publicly available as possible. So yeah, thank you, and thank you for attending. I think we can have one or two last questions. I'll read this question, and then I see there's someone raising their hand. But there's one question that says, there's a saying that goes, who has data has power. How open are we as government in sharing data, or does this saying apply to Zambia and Malawi? For example, between ministries and even between departments. So yeah, anyone can answer that. Perhaps Andrew, I've seen you've just come back.
Great, so maybe I will comment immediately on the sharing of data. I know we've been speaking about data security. Mostly when it comes to data security, we're looking at consent. So we secure your data as a citizen, but if you consent that your data can be used by identifying you in terms of your health status, maybe you have tuberculosis or HIV, in terms of you having a disability or something, you have to be willing to consent to that. And when it comes to operational data and personalized data, there becomes a variance. So government will look at operational data and probably treat you as a statistic, but at the point of entry, as I mentioned, in a community or in a district, you will be fully identified at a personalized level where services will reach you. But for the hierarchy of decision-making, that data gets disaggregated. But when we speak of sources of data, so source systems could be paper systems or could be electronic, that is a beginning where the synergy will happen between one government ministry to another. So if a record is totally on paper, it becomes more difficult for it to be shared across, because even if it was, it will probably be dumped somewhere in some records department, unless it's carrying particular information which you need some data analyst or someone to look through the paper process. But we need electronic systems. If we have electronic systems, and that's why the government wants electronic governance, so that the government can offer government to citizen services, similar to what we're experiencing in Zambia, where you're able to get certain services like your road licensing or things like that. We would also want you to log into a profile which has information about you. But most of this data requires from your national identity to be totally electronic, all the way up to your education services and any other interaction that you have. It means a lot more data will come closer to you as a citizen if this data is made electronic. And that is what is critical. But when it's being made electronic, we still have to safeguard your data unless you consent that you want it to be available for social health insurance, for example. But you accessing a government profile is some of the issues that the government is working around for government to citizen services. Over.
Thank you, Andrew. Does anyone else also want to?
Yeah, so
Bessie, yes.
Yes, I want to speak about the Unified Beneficiary Registry, because we are saying that the Unified Beneficiary Registry is just a repository of names and the social characteristics of households. So ministries, partners who want to use the data to target their beneficiaries and then implement their social protection programs in Malawi. So what we do is we have a data sharing protocol form if they want the data, they have to request it through a formal letter to the ministry, and the form was created by Minister of Justice. So some sort of information we cannot share, as my colleagues has already said, personalized data. So we only share most relevant information so that they can now target the beneficiaries which they want, but not more of personalized data. As maybe we can just say maybe in TH Romo, we have so many beneficiaries with disabilities. And then when they want to go to the household itself, then they have now to go to the district council now to seek that information so that they can reach that household as now a household with a disability or an elderly household. But for us, we have data sharing protocols which they can use if they want to for us to share data with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Bessie and Andrew. I think Abby also had their hand up before. Abby, do you still have a question?
It's not a question. Thank you very much, moderator, for this opportunity to make a contribution to this discussion. I want to start by thanking, I think, and commending all the discussants on the panel for the information which has been shared. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure other listeners and viewers have also appreciated what is being discussed. I wish to agree with the panelists that data and information plays a key role in decision making. And this is the very reason why the government of the Republic of Zambia, through the Ministry of Community Development and Social Services, entered into a memorandum of understanding with IDinsight. I'm glad that IDinsight is part of the panel also there. So in that MOU, which was signed in sometime last year in February, I think we agreed on 6 areas of collaboration, which included the impact evaluation, process evaluations, and also program design, and also issues of undertaking research. And I wish to also share with you that these areas were agreed upon between the ministry and IDinsight based on the needs of the ministry, as well as the areas in which IDinsight had expertise. Indeed, to adequately monitor and track progress in the way programs are being implemented, data becomes very critical, and also to identify other areas of our beneficiaries, and also the gaps which are in our social protection programming. I think there is need for data. And this is the reason why I think government institutions have been actually investing massively and heavily in systems development. I just wanted to make such a contribution to the meeting. Thank you very much, Natasha. Perhaps
Thank you so much, Abby.
Before I finish, and also I was looking at when I talked about impact evaluation, I'm sure most of the members of the meeting are aware that there is a Cash Plus initiative which is being implemented, where we are looking at complementarity between and among various programs. So we are looking at identifying programs which could actually be which could complement, I think, the benefits which social cash transfer has been trying to deliver to the community beneficiaries. So such programs may require, I think, carrying out an impact evaluation, and this is why this is one of the reasons as to why we decided to partner with IDinsight as a ministry. I don't want to go into details. I think there's a lot of work in which IDinsight has already started doing for the ministry. Thank you, moderator. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll say on behalf of me and Arthur as well. Arthur, do you have a question or comment?
No, basically, from the previous speaker's comment, there's something interesting that I just thought about. He talked about in Malawian context, there's the linkages and referral process, and then there are a lot of social cash programs, cash plus programs that are under implementation. I wanted maybe Bessie or Laurent to just talk a little about what they're doing in that front as part of sustainability.
Okay. Thank you, Arthur. Indeed, as Malawi, we are implementing linkages and the referrals. Basically, we are looking at cash plus interventions. From our end, we think that the linkages and referrals initiatives are an outlet for sustainability in as far as the cash transfer programs are concerned. We believe that from our end, just providing the cash has not been enough. But when you bring in some complementary interventions, some graduation interventions, that will be a recipe for sustainability, especially after, for example, our beneficiaries have been exited either administratively or through other means of exiting. So one of the initiatives, for example, that we are doing with IDinsight, we are trying to explore in Tioro, one of the districts, is to see what could be the best linkages and referral package that can best be implemented amongst our Utrapo and labor constrained beneficiaries. And of course, one thing surely we are trying to explore is a package that includes nutrition interventions, health interventions, and home management interventions as complementary to the social cash transfers that we provide to our beneficiaries. That's at our program level, but in OND, through this office, they are implementing even a more broader linkages and referral that links all of us into a more sustainable package of exit.
Yeah, so as the program holder, we are encouraging ministries and departments and even our donors to implement the pillar number 2. Thus, we are looking at resilience building so that the beneficiaries can graduate into sustainable livelihood. So in this pillar, we are looking at programs like the savings and loans groups, financial literacy education, the graduation component itself, looking at the seed money transfers, even the asset transfers, and also catchment management, because in this pillar we are looking at the causes of poverty, now tackling them, not just the symptoms, because the pillar number 1 is about consumption support. So you support them with their basic needs and then give them a chance so that they can engage into activities which can generate income into their homes. So looking at the livelihood interventions which can generate income so that they graduate in sustainable livelihoods. So that's what we are encouraging other partners to engage our participants of social protection programs interventions so that they also include them into these other interventions under resilience building. Thank you.
Thank you, Bessie. Okay, so we're about to wrap up. I see Kalobang as a hand, so I'll just ask Kalobang to be very concise in what you have to say, then we'll start to wrap up.
Yes, ma'am. I think just to mention that from the ILO, we have an Africa Social Protection Strategy 2021 to 2024 that has a component called the Social Protection Data Initiative for Africa. And what this aims to do is to develop and strengthen these frameworks that we've been talking about, and ensuring that social protection modules are also included in national surveys, censuses, etc., with a view to support the development of national data portals and dashboards. And I think mine is a challenge perhaps then to this meeting to say, Zambia, Malawi, we have made some progress, and it would be to have a follow-up session of this nature where we can then be able to share some of the social protection data that we have, and be able to use that as a framework that we can start to adopt nationally and build upon. So I think mine is a challenge to. This has been a start. Obviously, it's a step in the right direction, but you know, we still have some ways to go. So I think before the year's over, perhaps beginning Q3, it would be nice if we can organize a session between the two countries and compare notes in terms of data availability. And I think it would be great if we can position IDinsight to be a key player in this role. I think we were excited at the capacity that IDinsight has, and we're looking to strengthen this partnership. So I think it's a challenge to all of us. Let's look August, September to have a round where we're looking at these dashboards, seeing what's available, and be able to make this perhaps an ongoing theme, as we've said, some type of periodic exchanges. I think this will help us to put data central to our engagements, and I think we can be able to see a strengthening of those systems. Over. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kalabang. Yeah, so I mean, I'm very sure IDinsight is not opposed to hosting something again that focuses on data use in Malawi and Zambia for social protection. I think Arthur would agree. That's something we're definitely interested in. I see you've shared the resource of the Africa Social Protection Strategy. So yeah, thank you for that. I think that's a really, really great initiative and very important. We're going to wrap up now, and I guess this ties to what can IDinsight do more? So just to ask the panelists, so you all work with IDinsight, basically, what kind of support do you think we can provide to you that will just help you better achieve your impact? What do you need from us? And we will be happy to help.
Okay, for me, I think the technical assistance in terms of going beyond just, I think, the issue of data and the evidence generation to also encompass matters to do with the capacity building, strengthening our M&E systems, and also, yeah, continuous exploration of research themes that should seek to improve our processes from time to time. I think that's what I can say for me.
Yeah, so from the ministry's perspective in Zambia, apart from the data evidence generation and M&E support, capacity development becomes very critical. We have to be cognizant that when we start to speak about data, maybe not everyone is at the same level in terms of data utilization, even in terms of data, can I call it sourcing? The reason is basic. We have a lot of paper systems, and we're looking at improving our processes into electronic processes. And with electronic systems, what was on paper is visible at a push of a button. What used to take a month or two to come to a table, it's available immediately. And that also then, in terms of capacity development, comes to change management. Change management being the critical driver on how data will be used for decision support and decision making. If we cannot invest in that change management towards a data culture or a data savvy organization or informatics savvy organization, then it means we're not going to achieve much. So change management and capacity development is one of the critical factors that we require as a ministry, topped up with the M&D elements. Thank you. Over.
Just to agree with my colleagues, I think IDinsight should support us in terms of systems strengthening. As I said, that's one of the critical pillars, the supporting pillars under the Malawi National Social Support Program too. So would like IDinsight to work towards strengthening the systems so that we implement the social protection better and in a coordinated way. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Arthur, do you have any last words before we wrap this up?
Yeah, for me, it's to just thank the panelists, our government counterparts, for the hospitality. We are here celebrating the work that we have been doing together because they have let us work with them. They provide the space, they give us ideas on what needs to be done, and we work together to identify challenges that we can jointly solve. So that alone is something that I have to appreciate from our government counterparts for all the support, all the guidance that we've received. IDinsight alone, we may have the technical capacity, but if we don't have a willing government structure that intends to use data and evidence, it means we'll just remain there with skills and capacity. But the appetite to improve systems, to generate more data, use evidence for decisions, and eventually improves lives, that alone goes a very long way. So a big thank you to our government counterparts for accepting to be part of this and for hosting IDinsight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, so just want to say one final thank you to everyone who's attended this session. We really appreciated your listening ears, your interest, and also the questions and comments that you asked. I want to thank the panelists for joining us at IDinsight. We really love working with you, and we're glad that we're able to share this platform with you to discuss what you do. And we also want to thank the organizers, the Ministry of Community Development, ILO, for basically organizing this and letting us have this virtual platform. So thank you all for joining. This session will be available online soon. So please, you can check the IDinsight website. You can follow IDinsight on Facebook. You can also follow this Social Protection Week events on Facebook. And this recording will be available for future watching. So thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.